Shalom, Rabbi Fass.
Hi, Yoni.
First of all, you came here to the conference not from far away. Your new center in Jerusalem, but it's much more than a building and a structure.
It's a Beit Aliyah, obviously, to service Olim, and that means that there's pre-Aliyah advisors, there's Klita advisors, there's Ta'asuka advisors. We even have fingerprinting for the FBI for criminal background. We have a sniff of Misad Pnim within the facility. And then there is the concept of educating. We created a whole track to educate youth that are coming from America, those in the GAP programs and seminaries and yeshivot, that every single student here for their year will be able to talk about Zionut, not about Aliyah, but to be able to concretize their relationship with Israel. And then there's celebrating. We're going to celebrate moments of the lives of our Olim, even to sponsor weddings for Chayilim Bodedim in the facility, and also to advocate. We have a machon. We just opened a machon to aggregate the data that we have for the last 20 years so that we can create policy papers and advanced strategies for Klitat Aliyah.
Now, it's also about a community center because many people from around the world, from America, of course, are used to their synagogue, their shul with the community center. Then they come to Israel where the format is a bit different. So that's also what you're going to have, what you have already in this center. It's like a community center for these Olim.
100%. We have to, when Olim come, especially when they're single and they come to Israel, they feel extremely alone, and we have to create that sense of community. Sometimes you're absorbed immediately into your Beit Knesset. Sometimes you're looking for some kind of constructed community. So we're going to start having mifkashim in the building and also Friday night dinners so that people can feel a sense of community and also be able to meet one another.
Now, when you're talking about advocacy and policy, you know, one would think, Aliyah, everyone, there's a consensus that we should bring Olim. Everyone wants to bring Olim. What, in terms of policy, needs to change, or what do you want to promote?
Where do you start? There, unfortunately, in many of the laws that are passed within the Knesset, sadly, Olim are not being considered within the policy changes or the laws. Let's take an example for the last year and a half. When the skies were closed, no one even considered the concept.
They weren't closed for immigrants, but it's the...
Exactly, but for the families... For the families of the immigrants, they did not have the ability to celebrate smachot together, to be there even for moments of life and death, because it wasn't even considered, lo ala datam, to even consider Olim within that equation. Everything from Bituach Leumi aspects to learning, to even army service. Beforehand, when a physician made Aliyah, he was inducted to the army until the age of 30 plus, 33, 34, 35. A physician's coming to Israel, why would they're leaving everything and then they're all of a sudden being pulled away from their families to go to the army? We understand that there's a need for physicians in the army, but let's be practical. If we're going to try to encourage Aliyah, we want to try to facilitate integration, let's look through the prism of how do we encourage Aliyah and have them in the equation of the chukim that are being passed by the Knesset.
And is it also different because when in terms of Aliyah out of distress from places around the world, it was easier and maybe automatically for Israel to, treat them with special care. But in your case, where you call it Aliyah from choice, it's more challenging explaining what these people go through?
If you're running away from something, then if you give anyone anything that's better from the circumstances that they're coming from, then you're matzilota. But if someone is coming and giving up, in their mind they're giving up to, or they might be sacrificing a certain way of life to invest their future in Israel, and they want to hit the ground running, so the government should do everything in its power to make sure that when they land, they have the ability to run and to contribute instead of going through obstacle after obstacle, try to prove that they're even there in the country.
Tell us about the numbers. We've been reporting on Arutz Sheva, Israel National News, the numbers, the improvement. It's mainly about, at the beginning at least, about people interested in information. How is that translated to actual immigration?
We saw a huge increase during Corona of interest of making Aliyah, and it actually was actualized at the end of 2021. We saw an increase of almost 30% of Aliyah from North America. There were 4,500 Olim. I think Corona, besides the upheaval that it's created, it forced people to pause. to pause and to calibrate their own compass and to realize what they were trying to do in life. And the fact that you're able to work remotely, the fact that you were able to maintain relationships through Zoom, the fact that you're away from your kihilot and you're around your Shabbos table and trying to entertain the concept of where you wanted to be in life, allow people to start thinking about Aliyah. And we've seen those numbers tremendously increase. And the momentum is continuing. And I think we'll be near 5,000 in 2022.
And the biggest question, how do we keep them here in Israel?
Well, for the last 20 years, besides encouraging Aliyah and facilitating Aliyah, Nefesh has spent a lot of our time and effort in trying to keep the retention rate. 20 years ago, the retention rate was abysmal. We would have almost 55 or 60% people stayed, and 40% or even more would go back within 3 years. Baruch Hashem, after 20 years, we've seen that we've changed that. And now we have almost 90% of retention rate. Because as long as you have an address for people to realize that when you're feeling those drips before the dam breaks, that they have the ability to reach out to a ktovet, either for tasukah or for issues that they need social worker within their family, or community help or education work, that itself gives them the solution. There are a lot of solutions. This is an incredible country. We have a lot of solutions to integrate Olim. The fact that the loneliness sets in and they feel that they have nowhere to go, that's when you have individuals moving back to their hometown.
I wanted to ask you if you're still excited, but the truth is that I know. I see you sometimes on the flight, sometimes at the ceremonies. You're very excited. What's your most exciting moment? And by the way, I have a guess. Remember that flight when Israel was under fire? And you brought Olim, there were missiles, there were sirens, I think. We had a bride coming for a wedding with a soldier who was on the field.
There are a lot of inspirational stories. I think the one that speaks most to me, and I spoke about it at the Chanukah Bayit, we once had a charter flight, a Tisat Charter, and we had a survivor of the Shoah, a 90-year-old woman who was making Aliyah, and she happened to be sitting next to a 10-year-old girl. And during the flight, they became friends. This 90-year-old with this 9-year-old girl. And when the flight landed and the doors opened, they held each other's hands and they walked down those stairs. And just that nexus, that mifgash between those two different dorot, of the 90-year-old survivor of the Shoah who could not possibly imagine the concept of this miracle of the state of Israel, of all the sacrifices that went in to get to that moment. Holding hands with this 9-year-old girl who grew or was born into a world that Israel was a given, without any of the sacrifices, with just purely the future and the faith in the future. And just having that mifgash really concretized this concept of just the gift of the fulfillment of past dreams and prayers and the promise of the future.
Rabbi Yehoshua Fass, co-founder and CEO of Nefesh B'Nefesh. Thank you very much.
Toda לך, יוני.